to me, what's going on is worrying internationally. But if he's serious that he wants to do deals, then the UK should be going after that like a hungry dog, because we need growth. And an arrangement with the United States would be a means to achieve that. The way it's cast publicly, I find a bit bemusing. It's not a case of just being defensive, which seems to be the narrative. He's going to hurt us, he's going to do terrible things to us, we've got to try and stop that. If he did, yeah, you do. But in actual fact, there is a positive agenda there, which is this is still the most powerful economy in the world. He still says he's open to doing a deal. So whatever happens this next week, it shouldn't be sort of seen to be the end of the story one way or the other. You should go for it and be ambitious.
As we've been discussing, tariffs have already been announced on steel, and there could yet be a 25% tariff on British manufactured cars from Wednesday, and perhaps other tariffs as well. Let's speak to Sir Crawford Falconer, who was the UK's chief trade negotiator from 2017 until January this year, previously New Zealand's representative to the World Trade Organization. Hello to you.
Morning.
What is going on in international trade, and why does it matter to ordinary people?
Well, it's basically the old system is breaking up and pretty much has broken up. And the reason it matters is, one, because it's less stable. So therefore, you have less investment. Businesses have less ability to rely on doing business the way they're used to, which means that prices can go up, people hold off on investment, and therefore, your economy is affected. So, and if you put the tariffs up, generally, and it's like putting an increased tax on, you increase the cost of goods and services if it applies to services. So eventually you get that effect on ordinary people and ordinary consumers. So it just also makes trade relations and political relations between countries more difficult, more tense, and stressful.
Do tariffs work? I mean, Donald Trump's argument is basically I'll keep out foreign imports, and therefore that will stimulate my domestic industry. Does that work?
In the short term, it can actually stimulate certain businesses because they now have tariff protection. They were less efficient before, so in actual fact, you have a higher cost structure for that industry. It's less competitive internationally, but yeah, it might grow. I mean, there was a period of time when that's what people built high tariff walls so they could have a domestic industry, but they weren't internationally competitive and their economies eventually tanked on that basis. So therefore people said, well, we've got to get rid of these things because we're taxing innovation, we're taxing business unnecessarily, and we can become more efficient. So the whole history post-war has been dismantle those barriers. Now, some people who are not competitive say, well, actually, I'd like to have this business in motor vehicles. I'd like to have this business. So therefore, yeah, you can make it. You can make it for certain sectors, but you put costs on other parts of your economy. So overall, your growth goes down. I mean, it would be hard to find serious economists who would disagree. Not that I would rest it on the shoulders of economists. Common sense tells you that.
You tried to get a trade deal with Trump's United States and a subsequent administration. How do you rate the chances of the UK being managed to do some kind of side deal which isolates us from the worst impacts of the tariffs?
Yeah, well, we ran out of time basically under Trump. Trump won. It was basically 6 months of intensive work, and we made a lot of progress, but just didn't have time. And the Biden administration wasn't really interested for all sorts of reasons, some of which are the same for why Trump is adopting the position that he's adopting now. Well, I'm a great believer in the suck it and see philosophy. I mean, you've got to try. Have lots of people sitting on the sidelines saying this is impossible, that's impossible, but you've got to actually try. And to me, what's going on is worrying internationally. But if he's serious that he wants to do deals, then the UK should be going after that like a hungry dog, because we need growth. And an arrangement with the United States would be a means to achieve that. The way it's cast publicly, I find a bit bemusing. It's not a case of just being defensive, which seems to be the narrative. He's going to hurt us, he's going to do terrible things to us, we've got to try and stop that. If he did, yeah, you do. But in actual fact, there is a positive agenda there, which is this is still the most powerful economy in the world. He still says he's open to doing a deal. So whatever happens this next week, shouldn't be sort of seen to be the end of the story one way or the other. You should go for it and be ambitious ourselves.
What could we offer, though?
Well, I think we offer what I would call first mover advantage. We can be a model for what's done. Now, economically, we don't have the power of the European Union. We're not anywhere near that size. But if he's interested, now that's what you have to test. You're not naive about it. If he's interested in doing deals that are genuinely liberalising, then he can do one with the UK if the UK is up for it, and therefore it's a message to the rest of the world. Well, I'm not just carrying the big stick. These characters have actually come up with something not that's in my interest particularly, but is in their interest because it's giving them liberalisation and investment. So I think there's a completely different story that should be told. I mean, I was listening to your previous speakers on the session before about doom loops. I mean, we've got to break out of this doom loop. I mean, you can sit and say, oh dear, something more terrible is going to happen to us. Well, the answer is get on the front foot and do something about it.
But we know from Donald Trump that he's a zero-sum player. And if he was going to offer us more liberal trade, we would have to say to him, I mean, it wouldn't work, him saying this is good for them and it's not particularly good for me. He needs to have some kind of win. So what would we offer him?
Of course.
What would we offer him, for example, freedom to export American agricultural produce?
Well, of course you're going to have to make a judgment, and that judgment for any agreement, including with the United States, would be you have to liberalise. Now, the details of every single tariff line, ultimately you negotiate that at the end of the day. But there's no reason why the United Kingdom could not, across the board, have liberalisation in goods and as much of services as is feasible with the United States. I mean, what are we hanging on to? A 10% tariff on motor vehicles, for goodness sake, and some higher tariffs in agriculture. But we've got a lot more at stake economically in areas like AI and so on, and in services, where we can make gains. So I see there's no question.
So cut or don't impose an online services tax?
I think you actually have to be prepared to negotiate on it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the digital services tax, you've got to remember, we're not the worst offender in terms of digital services taxes, but you have to look at what the economic benefits will be of investment and of the other parts of your economy. So, this won't be sorted. There's no way this would be sorted in the course of this weekend and next week. But what really matters, and the test is, are there signs from these discussions that there is a serious engagement as opposed to a diplomatic flim-flam exercise that things are fine, and then get on and try and put pressure on the other side to deliver as well.
What about the agricultural area, though? Should we just leave that to one side? I mean, Nigel Farage is saying you could get around it by labelling that this is chlorinated chicken.
Of course, there are umpteen ways to get around it. And bear in mind, the United States is not perfect in this. So you say, we want access for our dairy products to the United States. Watch them rush for the exits. And when they rush for the exits at that particular proposition, you say, well, OK, come on, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. So, I might be prepared to liberalise a lot of stuff. Do I really need all these ridiculous tariffs that I've got on jams and jellies and what have you? So I might trade those. But no, I'm not going to do complete liberalisation on something that's equivalent to you not doing complete liberalisation. You don't make the whole thing hostage to one issue. And that's what the negativity of the narrative is, which bothers me. The gains that we can get across the economy are far more significant than one or two problem areas that you could negotiate.
So is there any way we should retaliate if he imposes tariffs on us?
I think there can be tactical reasons to retaliate, and let's wait and see. I mean, I have said publicly that I think what you do is you negotiate, you test whether the other side are genuinely engaged, and if you make the judgment that they are genuinely engaged as opposed to just playing a game, then you can take the decision tactically, I won't do it. If you're making progress and the other side is showing that they're showing their cards, then you probably shouldn't. But if they're not, if they're just shutting up shop, then of course it makes sense at a certain point to look like you're an adult and you can take it and you can put in provisional tariffs.
And just finally, VAT.
Yeah.
Americans who support the tariffs are saying VAT is a tariff. Is VAT a tariff?
VAT is not a tariff, obviously, but what I will say about VAT is they're not entirely wrong in every respect because the incidence of VAT is effectively taxing some of their exports to countries that use sales tax or VAT. And so therefore you could argue that the EU...
It also taxes our domestic production.
It does. There's an equality of it, but it has an incidence on them. It's not. You can't deny that there isn't an economic incidence. So there's something to talk about there, not to abolish a VAT, but there's something to talk about. And if we're talking about an economy like the UK economy that really is needing growth, then you should be asking the question of everything. Do we have to just sit on our hands for what we have done, or do we decide, we could look at these sacred cows and see what the gains are? That's a simple question.
Sir Crawford Falconer, thank you very much indeed. Awful lot to think about there.